Never read a Bible verse. He says that never reading a Bible verse is the most important practical skill he's ever learned as a Christian. In fact, he says it's the single most important skill that he could teach any follower of Jesus Christ. Never read a Bible verse. Now, what he means by that provocative statement is that the context of a verse is vital to knowing what it means. He says that in order to understand a verse, you need to read at the very least, a paragraph before and after the surrounding text so that you can unlock what the meaning of the passage is. So following that principle is super important because it keeps us from saying something that God didn't mean to be said. And it's important that we follow that principle so that we don't run off into some kind of crazy ideas. Let me give you an example. Maybe some of you are familiar with some of these verses. There's a verse that says this. It's in Matthew 18:19. And this is Jesus speaking. And he says, "Again, I say to you that if two of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by the Father who is in heaven." So there it is. So if two of us come together in prayer about anything, believing that God will do it, then he's going to do it. So you need some money to pay a bill? Just find some other Christian who agrees with you on that, pray together, and boom, you're going to get your bill paid. I mean, doesn't that sound like that? And in fact, if you've been around Christian circles long enough, you've heard people use a verse like that to basically say that. Look, hey, let's just be in agreement. Let's just pray. And in agreement, bless God, he's going to make it happen. Here's another one that's actually the verse right after this one. "For where two or three have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst." I can't tell you how many prayer gatherings I've been to where this verse is quoted. Hey, look, there's 15 of us here. Jesus said, if there are two or three gathered in his name, he's going to be right there in the middle. So in my mind, I'm going, well, if we don't meet that quota, does that mean he's not here? If I'm all by myself praying, does that mean Jesus isn't present because I don't have two or three? But, I mean, that's what it says, right? Well, this is exactly what Greg Kokel means by never read a Bible verse. What's the context? What's going on here? It's so important for us to know what is happening in this area where Jesus makes these statements. So let's back up a little bit. And this comes in a whole chunk of teaching that Jesus has given. And it starts off just a few verses previous in verse 15. Jesus says this, "If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private." So okay, I'm already starting to get a context here. Jesus is giving some directions about what do you do when someone sins against you, when they offend you. And he says, well, go to them and talk to them in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. Hey, great, that's what you want, right? Reunification, getting things straight, getting the air cleared. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you. So that, now he quotes the Old Testament, by the mouth of two or three witnesses, every fact may be confirmed. So look, if you go to your brother who's offended you and you talk to him and he says, hey, look, I'm so sorry, and you guys get that cleared up, great. But if you go to him and that brother says, get out of my face, then you go and you find somebody, at least one, and maybe two, to take with you so that you can talk to them again. And this time you have witnesses, so it's not just you saying they blew you off. Now you've got other people that are going, dude, let's get this right. Stop acting like this, right? That's what he's saying here. Then he goes on. If he refuses to listen to them, then tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, Let him be to you as a Gentile and tax collector. Well, how are we supposed to treat people outside the church? Well, we're supposed to assume that they don't know Jesus and we need to get Jesus to them. So if a person, in other words, if this person who's supposed to be a brother is acting like they're not a brother, then start trying to get Jesus to them. That's what he's saying. All right, and then he goes on. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Here's our passage. Again, I say to you that if two of you agree on earth about anything that you may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. What's he talking about? He's talking about this process of what we refer to as discipline, right? If you agree in this process, right? If you're going about what Jesus directed here, you're in a good place. And then he says, for where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I'm there in their midst. He's not talking about a prayer meeting. He's talking about dealing with a brother who's fallen into sin, right? So do you see how important the context is to what's going on here? And that we have to be very careful that we're not just reading a Bible verse. Now, I wanted to take a little extra time this morning by way of this unusual intro to kind of go through that real quick with you, because we're going to come to a statement in our passage this morning that's one of these statements that's used a lot, that we need to understand when we take it outside of its context, it's used in a brutal kind of way. So kind of keep that in mind, because we're going to get there in just a minute. But we want to step into, before we step into the specific passage, we want to be reminded of our setting. Where are we at? What's going on? Because what we're doing in these 3 verses that Dane read this morning is we're jumping literally near the end of a sermon that Jesus was giving. So we got to have to refresh our minds if you've been with us. And if you're new, hopefully you'll kind of catch on what's happening here. But this starts way back in in verse 12 of chapter 6. Jesus has been on a mountain with his disciples, his followers. He's been praying all through the night. When he finishes his time of prayer, that probably lasted somewhere between 8 to 10 hours, he then goes and meets back up with his disciples. Again, followers, we don't know how many. There may have been 50, there may have been 100. It would have been a mixture of men and women. And he meets with these followers and he chooses 12 to be his apostles. 12 that would be apostles. They're disciples, but they're kind of a step above just the regular disciple. These guys are called apostles, which means messengers, ones that are sent, because Jesus is going to train them in a special way. For the time that he leaves, he's going to use them to be sent out into the world. And so Jesus picks these 12. They eventually descend off of this mountain, the disciples, the apostles, and Jesus, and they get down to this plain area, this plateau, and here's this massive crowd. And these are people from all over the place. They've come some as far as 90 plus miles away to be here in this place because they heard that Jesus was there, and the text tells us they wanted to hear him. They had heard stories about this amazing teacher, and it was so compelling. I got to hear this for myself. Remember, there's no newspapers, there's no internet. This is all word of mouth kind of stuff. And if you wanted to see somebody or hear somebody, you couldn't just turn on a device. You had to literally make the effort to go. And these people went because they wanted to hear this guy. Not only did they want to hear him, they had heard that this man heals people. If you got a sickness, this guy can heal you. If you've got a demon, he can cast it out. And so it tells us that these people came to hear Jesus and to be healed. And so that's what he did. He was speaking to them. He was healing them. He was casting out the demons. And then when we get to verse 20, in the midst of all of this, or near the end of all of this healing and casting out demons, Jesus again focuses his attention back on his disciples, his followers, which would have included the 12. But this word was not for the crowds. This word was for the disciples, it tells us. And he begins to preach this surprising sermon. And what we've discovered over the last few weeks is there was some shocking things that Jesus said for those disciples right there and for the disciples right here. He talked first of all about happiness. And he said something like this: happy are you who are poor. Happy are you who are hungry. Happy are you who mourn. Happy are you who are rejected. And you got to know that those guys must have been standing there going, what on earth is he talking about? But as you look deeper at it, and what he says in contrast is, look, happy are you who are poor because the kingdom of heaven is yours. Look, he's not talking about, look, your happiness is found in present circumstances. He's saying because you're my disciple, you have something to look forward to. You have the kingdom to look forward to. This world is not your home. You've got another one that you're looking forward to. So, happy are you who are poor, because the kingdom of heaven is yours. Happy are you who are hungry, because you will be filled. Happy are you who mourn, because you're going to laugh. And happy are you who are rejected, when people hate you and revile you and say all kind of manner of things against you. Because you follow me, guess what? Great is your reward in heaven. Well, still, that would have been just like radical. Wait a minute. I thought happiness was found in riches, in food, in being happy, in being praised. And Jesus goes, no. Much sorrow awaits a person that's pursuing those things. And then, if that weren't enough, as they were kind of reeling from the shock of all that, he says, look, if you can hear anything else, I got something else for you. Love your enemies. So if being happy despite your circumstances wasn't enough, now he's telling them, not just, hey, love everybody, because we could kind of pick and choose in our minds what that meant. So he left everybody out, because there's certain people that are easy to love, and he goes right to the heart of the matter. He says, love your enemies. Love those. Do good to those who hate you. Speak well of those who curse you. Then he says, pray for those who insult you. And give. And just keep giving. And if they want more, just keep giving them more. And you got to imagine that the people hearing this are just standing there trying to figure out, what is he saying? This is impossible. And Jesus is trying to explain to them, look, the world is going this way. The disciples, the followers of the world, they're swimming downstream. If you follow me, you're going to be going upstream. You are an upstream disciple, and you're going to look a whole lot different than these guys. In fact, in another place, Jesus says, many are these guys, few are these guys. And so you got to know that at this point, they're saying to themselves, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to have happiness like that? Do I really want to love like that? And we left off last week at verse 36, where Jesus says, you must be compassionate, or as Dane read this morning, merciful, just as your Father is compassionate. Do you understand the depth of that statement? Now, it's a little better if you understand it. In the word be there should actually be becoming. So it reads like this: you must be becoming compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Does it make you feel any better? In other words, Jesus is saying, look, you want to be an upstream disciple of mine, you've got to be in the process of becoming merciful and compassionate just like God is. That's your goal. Now, if their jaw wasn't dropping already, it would have been on the floor at this point. And what we see from that point on in the next couple of verses is a picture of instructions of what that looks like. And so if you're following this morning and we step into our story, number one is this: the extraordinary instructions for upstream disciple compassion. Jesus gives 4 instructions. If you're going to be compassionate, merciful like God is. And by the way, this type of mercy is undeserved kindness. Now stop and think about it. Remember who Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about just everybody in general. He's still focused on enemies. To have undeserved kindness toward your enemies. See, if you can do that, then you're going to have undeserved kindness toward everybody. If you can do it toward your enemies, then it's not going to be a problem with anybody else. So he zeroes in on the most difficult. And he gives us 4 instructions. 2 are negative and 2 are positive. And here's the first one. Do not judge. You want to demonstrate the mercy and the kindness and the compassion of God to your enemy, then don't judge. And here it is. Here's that statement I was referring to just a few minutes ago. This is arguably the most misused and misinterpreted statement in all of the Bible. And not just by Christians, but by people outside the church. Right? I mean, how many of you have ever had somebody say to you, hey, don't judge me? Right? I mean, we've all had that, right? Or if you have a little bit more Bible background, somebody will say, oh, Jesus said don't judge. Right? Where are they getting that? They're getting that from here and from Matthew's account of the Sermon on the Mount. But same idea. And this is used all the time. It's kind of a get out of jail free card, right? When I'm doing something wrong and you point it out, hey, don't judge me. So it's kind of like, just let me do what I'm going to do. And don't judge me. Who are you to judge me? Right? And so what do we typically do? We back off. Especially if we think, oh yeah, that is what Jesus said. But is it? Is that what Jesus is saying here? Is this some kind of a blanket, like I said, get out of jail free card that, look, just leave me alone. Let me do what I'm going to do. Don't point out my sin. Don't tell me that I'm wrong. It's not for you to judge. Is that what Jesus is saying here? Well, this is exactly why we need to put into practice Greg Kogle's idea of never read a Bible verse. In this case, never read just a statement. We need to go a little bit deeper in the text itself. Look, I know that that's not what Jesus is saying, because if it was, he'd be contradicting himself. Because if you go down just a few more verses, and we'll look at this next week, but if you go down just a few more verses, listen to what he says. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. Well, how do I know if it's bad fruit or good fruit? Guess what? I got to make a judgment. Right? Verse 44, a tree is identified by its fruit. In other words, you figure it out by looking at it and judging it. Right? Figs are never gathered from thorn bushes, and grapes are not picked from bramble bushes. A good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. How do I know what a good heart is and an evil heart is if I don't make a judgment? Right? So I know, look, if Jesus is telling us in those verses, just a few verses down in the context, that we're to put to practice a certain type of judgment, then I know he's not making a blanket statement up here when he says, don't judge. He's not just saying, judgment's out the window, can't judge anything. He can't be saying that. Or in the same sermon, he contradicts himself. I also know he's not saying it because he'd be contradicting the rest of Scripture. I mean, stop and think about it. Jesus said, I didn't come to destroy the law, but to what? Fulfill it. Well, what's the most basic part of the law? The 10 Commandments. What are the 10 Commandments? Thou shalt not, thou shalt, right? Well, what is that? Those are standards for making moral judgments, right? I mean, isn't that what the 10 Commandments is? So if Jesus said, I didn't come to destroy that, I came to fulfill it. In other words, look, you guys can't do it. That's the whole point. You can't keep the law. I've come to show you that I can, which makes me qualified to be the sacrifice for the sin of the whole world. Well, how would we even know that Jesus was qualified to be the sacrifice for the sin of the whole world unless we made a judgment? And that's what the 10 Commandments are. They're a standard. They're something that we use in judgment. And let me just refer just one more. These are all over the place. But Paul says this to the church in Corinth. He says, look, when I wrote you before, I told you not to associate with people who indulge in sexual sin. But I wasn't talking about unbelievers who indulge in sexual sin or are greedy or who cheat people or who worship idols. You would have to leave this world to avoid people like that. I meant that you're not supposed to associate with anyone who claims to be a believer, yet indulges in sexual sin, or is greedy, or worships idols, or is abusive, or is a drunkard, or who cheats people. Don't even eat with such people. What's he saying? You've got to make some judgments here. I don't know if that's what he's saying, Ren. Okay, let's keep going. It isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders, but it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside the church who are sinning. God will judge those on the outside. But as the scriptures say, you must remove the evil person from among you. What's he saying? We've got to make some judgments at times, and there's a standard by which to make those judgments. So when Jesus says in Luke 6, don't judge, it's not a general get-out-of-jail-free card. You cannot point out anybody's sin or make any kind of standard proclamation. It just can't be. And the other reason that I know, not just because Jesus would be contradicting himself, he'd be contradicting Scripture, but also because it's absolutely impossible to live life judgment-free. He made us to be rational people, and part of ration is making judgment calls. That's not a good person for my child to hang around with. We're going this direction. Well, if Jesus is making a general statement about judgment, you just violated that. So you see, just from common sense, that's not what Jesus is saying. And yet we use that all the time as if that's what he was saying. So you go, okay, so what's he saying? Here we go. This is where context is so important. Again, when I'm looking at it, he says, don't judge. In my mind, I know he's not saying just in a general way. So the first question I ask myself is, don't judge who? Who's he talking about? There's a context here. Who has he already been talking about? Love your enemies. Enemies are in view here. The people that are against you because you follow him, verse 21. He's saying, look, these people, don't rail against them like they're railing against you. Look, they're coming against you because you follow me. You must be merciful like God is merciful. How is he merciful? Well, he just told him right above that, if you look at it, he says that he does good even to those who are wicked and ungrateful. And he's just telling us now, look, put it to practice. Don't judge them. Say, what does that look like? Well, again, context. Let's go down to the next one. He says, don't condemn. So judgment and condemnation here are kind of paired together as negatives. We're supposed to show this compassionate mercy, undeserved kindness to those who are hating on us because we're following Jesus, and it's not our call to make ultimate judgments and condemnation on them. Wait, we talked about this a little bit last week. The world says, man, you hate me, I hate you back, right? You curse me, I curse you worse. You hurt me, I destroy you. That's what the world says, right? Jesus is going, no. We're going to swim upstream. And as you swim upstream, those that are coming against you, you let me take care of judgment, and you let me take care of condemnation. You go, what does that look like? Well, again, we don't sit in God's seat. We don't make those judgment calls. Well, that person's going to hell. They're just a God hater. Well, look, you know what? That's what they expect you to do. Do you realize that? When people come against us, you know what they're looking for? For us to come back the same way. When they yell at us, they're waiting for us to yell back. And then they'll get higher, and then we get higher, and then we walk away and we go, yeah. Or we walk away and we go, oh, shucks, why did I do that? Because we know that wasn't the right response. Jesus says, man, you're not the one that sits in judgment and condemnation of these people. When I was in high school, there was a girl that trusted Christ, and she had a really rough background, and just like all kinds of stuff she was involved in. And so she got saved. She got radically saved. I mean, she was just like on fire for Jesus. And this was like junior, senior year of high school. And I remember she hadn't been saved very long, and she was with a youth leader from her youth group, and they were witnessing to this guy, and the guy was just rejecting it. He was just like, I don't believe that stuff. I think you're crazy. And she was getting frustrated because she was a brand new Christian. She didn't quite know where to go with it. And the guy finally said, you're nuts. And she said, well, then go to hell. It's not an effective evangelism tool. She made a judgmental condemnation on a guy in her zeal and in her infancy as a believer, right? That's not our place. You let God take care of that. They're on the outside, right? Now, we expect more from folk who claim to be following Jesus. But don't expect more from folks that don't know Jesus. Listen, Tony Evans, he has a great definition for a sinner. Listen to this. They sin. Isn't that good? Remember that the next time you're out in the world with people that don't know Jesus, guess what? They sin, and they have an excuse because they don't know Jesus. We sin, and we have no excuse because we know Jesus. And what Jesus is saying here, if you are going to be one of my disciples and you're going to swim upstream, guess what? You're going to want to judge these folks, and you're going to want to condemn these folks. That's not what we do. You let God take care of that. And then he gives some positive instructions too. And again, I think these are paired together. He says, forgive. The word literally there means to release or to set free. Now remember, these are he's again, keep in context, these are enemies. These are people that are against you because you follow Jesus. And he says, look, just release it. Just let it go. Don't hold on to it. I'm reminded of Jesus on the cross, right? He makes that incredible proclamation hanging on the cross. Father, what? Forgive them. Why? Because they don't know what they're doing. And my contention, folks, is that we have got to see the world from a compassionate, merciful, loving eye of the Father and go, man, they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand what they're doing. So don't hold this. Release it. Set it free. Don't hold on to that. And then he says, give. Which again, I think is interesting because he said that back when he was talking specifically about loving our enemies, right? And now this is kind of falling off of that. And so he says it again, give. Just give. Look, your job is to grace them. You go, well, they don't deserve it. That's what grace is. It's an undeserved gift, right? So he's given us a picture. Grace them. Forgive them? Yeah, that's more mercy. Give? Yeah, that's grace. You go, man, this is really hard. Yeah, you know why? Because it's upstream. It's not what the world's saying. Jesus said, look, if you're going to follow me, if you're going to be my disciple, you're going against the current. And you just need, look, if Jesus ever wanted to keep people, this was the time. He's just picked the 12, and here are the other followers, and they've experienced all this ministry, people being set free from demons and sickness, and then he has this chance to speak to them. This would be a great opportunity to say, okay, guys, I'm so glad you're following me, and we're just going to have a great time over the next couple years. And I just wanted to encourage you, and just turn around and look in your brother's face and say, I want to encourage you. Go ahead, say it. But does he do that? No. He says, guess what? If you follow me, happiness isn't going to look like what you think it looks like. If you're going to follow me, love isn't going to look like what you think it looks like. If you're going to follow me, compassion it's a whole new world. And they're sitting there scratching their heads going, wow. Just like you and me should be sitting there scratching our heads going, wow. What do we expect? Or what should the expectations for an upstream disciple compassion be? If we're going to have compassion like this toward the ones who are against us, what should we expect? Well, you won't be judged for judging. Jesus said, don't judge others, and you won't be judged. In other words, if you put yourself in the position of ultimate judge when you're not supposed to be, then you better expect that you're going to be judged for judging that way, right? So he said, if you don't judge that way, you don't have to worry about being judged for judging that way. And then he says, you won't be condemned. Don't condemn others. And the New Living Translation says, or it will come back against you. But literally it says, and you won't be condemned. Don't condemn, and you won't be condemned. And the word condemn there is a passing of a sentence. Kind of like saying to somebody, well, then go to hell. That's kind of a passing of a sentence. That's not mine to make. And by the way, stop and think when you say that to someone, what you're saying to them. That is a really serious statement. Go to hell. Man, you shouldn't wish that on anybody. And Jesus says, I'm supposed to love my enemies. So I certainly shouldn't be speaking those kind of condemnations and judgments, right? And if I don't condemn in that way, then I should expect that I won't be judged for condemning in that way. That's what Jesus is saying. On the other hand, you'll be given mercy. Forgive others, set them free, let it go, and you will be forgiven. Just look. If I'm not holding on to all this mess because these people are coming after me and they're doing this kind of stuff to me, it frees me. I'm not carrying that stuff. Look, God, I'm not going to sit in that seat. I'm going to show compassion. They don't deserve it. That's what mercy is all about. I'm letting that go. I don't want to carry that around. And look, I won't. And in the process, I receive mercy, right? And then you can expect you'll be given to generously. This is really interesting. He could have just said, give and you'll receive. And he could have just left it right there. But he doesn't. He describes what you receive. Listen to what he says. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. Now, this is another one of those never read a Bible verse. I cannot tell you how many sermons I have heard in my lifetime about giving money to the church because when you do, you're just going to get it all back plus. Using that verse. And that has nothing to do with you giving money to the church. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say this. If that's why you're giving, if you're giving, stop giving. Because that's a wrong motive. Look, here's the bottom, and this is not a sermon on giving, by the way. It's all God's anyway. The question should never be, God, how much do you want me to give? The question should be, Lord, how much do you want me to keep? Because it's His, right? Side note, squirrel, back on here again. So, what is he saying here? Well, he's giving them a picture. They all would have recognized this picture. The other night, I don't remember what it was. It was maybe a box of cookies or something. I don't remember what it was. Louise opened up. She goes, oh my goodness, come here, look at this. I said, what, is there bugs in it or something? She goes, no, look at that. I go, what's wrong with it? She goes, the box is this big, and there's like this much on the bottom, right? You experience that? Well, Jesus is saying, look, the picture is this. Bring your box, and because you've given, we're going to fill that deal full of cookies, and then we're going to shake it to make sure that all the spots get filled, and then we're going to put a few more cookies in it, and we're going to press it down, not too hard because we don't want to crush the cookies, but we want to make sure that there's enough to get some more in. And you know what? Just to make sure, we're going to just keep stacking cookies on there and get your shirt out because some of those cookies might fall into your shirt. That's the picture here. He's saying, look, you're all worried about, man, I'll be taken advantage of if I live this way. And Jesus saying, hey, don't you think I'm a better father than that? Don't you think I can take care of you? If I ask you to swim upstream and to give in this way, do you not think I can take care of you? I mean, I created the world before breakfast one morning, and you don't think that I can take care of you? See, folks, this is just, it's absolutely, totally against the current of the world. But it's absolutely, totally what makes a disciple of Jesus set apart from the rest of the world. And Jesus wants us to live in such a way that the world says, that's not normal. But I want to know more. Why do they love like that? Why do they have compassion like that? How can they be happy when... And when we live that way, when we live like this, we open up an avenue for the good news. See, it's not about just having a happy marriage and good kids and joyful on the job. It's not about just cruising through life with all of these good things happening to you, and that's why I follow Jesus. No, look, it's about bringing glory to the one who deserves all the glory, right? And the amazing thing is, as I live that way, desiring to give back that glory, it comes back on me. Right? And in the most basic way, when I show this compassion and this kindness to my enemy. And I said it last week, I'll say it again. I don't want to do that. And it's impossible for any of us to do it without the supernatural work of Jesus in our hearts and our lives. So if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to start doing this stuff, and you don't know Jesus, good luck. See, Jesus is purposely saying these provocative things, and we'll see more. By the way, we're just in chapter 6. We'll see more, and it builds. Because he wants folk to come to that place of absolute helplessness, going, I need to be rescued because I can't do what he's saying I should be doing. And Jesus would be saying, that's right. That's why I came. I came to rescue you because you can't do any of this. So if you're here this morning and you go, yeah, this all sounds really good. I really would love to do that. But you don't know Jesus, you can't do it. That's the whole point. Well, just 2 lessons as we finish up this morning. And they're pretty obvious. But here's the first one. Let God do God. Stop trying to step into God's spot. Right? Paul said it very well in Romans 12. He said, dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. Literally, the word there should be wrath, right? Wrath is anger, but it's a divine anger. It's a divine anger linked to justice. See, God is angry at injustice, and he will one day make everything right. And Paul's saying, okay, leave that to him. There are injustices, and you're going to see them, but leave it to God. For the scripture says, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Instead, boy, see if this sounds familiar. If your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing what? Good. Man, does that sound like Jesus? Does that sound like the sermon we're in right now? I mean, Paul is just mirroring what Jesus is saying in this sermon. Look, you don't be God. Follow him. Reflect him by the way that you are happy despite your circumstances because you know what he has on ahead. You're loving your enemies despite the fact that they're doing all these things against you. And you're compassionate like he is compassionate, merciful and kind, whether they deserve it or not, because none of us do. And you just be that guy and let me take care of the rest of it. You let me do the God part. The judgment and the condemnation and the reward, that's up to me. So stop. Just let me be God. And by the way, he does a much better job. Here's number 2, and this is right out of the sermon. Do to others as you would like them to do to you. See, here's why I put that down. Because, and I think I told you this last week, I don't totally understand this whole sermon. Because it's so contrary to what we know. But Jesus plugged right in the middle of the sermon this statement. Look, you don't get it? You don't understand it all? How can I live this way? Okay. Everything aside, zero in on that one statement. Do to others what you would want them to do to you. I mean, that really sums it up, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, I'm not going to be compassionate to them because I don't want them to be compassionate to me. Really? I'm not going to love them because I don't want them to love me. Really? I'm not going to do good to them because I don't want them to do good to me. Is that right? Well, you need some deep help. Because nobody thinks like that that's healthy. I want people to be compassionate toward me. I want them to do good to me. I want them to love me. Jesus is saying, look, that's the way you were made. That's the way I designed you. Sin came into the world and messed that up. I'm calling you back to be who I designed you to be. I'm calling you back to be that image bearer that I made you to be. So here's the bottom line. If I'm going to love them like I want to be loved, if I'm going to do to them like I want done to me, I want best for me. And I got a hunch you do too. Well, what's best? Well, we spent some time earlier singing about it. We opened up with a passage about it in 1 John 5. Best? Well, that's God himself. That's Jesus. I want Jesus for them. Oh yeah, but they're trashing you and they're saying all kinds of junk against you and they're doing bad by. I know, but they don't know what they're doing. They need Jesus. I want Jesus for them. He's absolutely the best. I want Jesus for me, and I want Jesus for them. See how that works? Do to them what you want for you. If we're honest, we want best, so we need to want best for them. Amen? Amen. Would you bow your heads, please? Close your eyes. Next week, Lord willing, we're going to finish up Jesus' sermon. It's hard, folks. These things have been hard. But if you stop and think about them, would you expect anything else from Jesus? He is calling us to something different. He's calling us to what we were designed to be. Happy, loving, compassionate, reflectors, images of the Creator. Without him, can't do it. Just can't. That's why he came to rescue us. He died on a cross after living a life demonstrating that he was the only one that could fulfill the law. He could do it. He could live by those standards that nobody else could, which made him that perfect, unblemished sacrifice that was acceptable. And he took our place. He paid our debt on that cross. And he proved that that sacrifice was sufficient and real and good, and that he was everything he said he was when he rose again from the dead 3 days later. That was the proof that everything was real and true and right. That's why Easter's so important. So the debt's been paid, but the question is, have you accepted the payment for your debt? See, a payment is only as good as the one who accepts the payment on their behalf. And God is holding out the payment saying, I paid the price. Will you accept it? And that offer is to everyone. And that offer is extended this morning. If you've never placed your faith and trust in what Jesus did on the cross, paying for the debt of your sin so that you could have a relationship with God right now that goes all the way into eternity. Man, that's my encouragement to you right now, that you would do that. There's no magic words to say. There's nothing creepy or mysterious you have to do. Scripture says you just call on the name of the Lord. You just tell him. You don't say anything out loud. God knows your thoughts. He knows exactly what you're thinking right now. And you just tell him, God, I believe you sent Jesus, the perfect sacrifice, to pay the debt of my sin. I don't understand all of this, but I believe that Jesus is your son. And the best way I know how, I'm trusting him. I want to follow him. Please come into my life. Forgive me of my sin. I want to follow Jesus. If you've done that, if you know that you're a follower of Jesus, you're his disciple. You are following him. These words are hard, but they're not impossible because you have Jesus. We have Jesus now. And so these things are possible. And as we hear these words from Jesus in this sermon, may we renew ourselves to being the reflectors of his happiness, his love, his compassion. Lord, I pray that we would be that people. I pray that we would be the most joyful people that anybody knows. I pray that we would be the most loving people that anybody knows. I pray, Lord, that we'd be the most compassionate people, most merciful people that anyone knows. And we know, God, that that's a work of you in our hearts, in our lives, to make us those people. So as we are becoming those things, Lord, thank you for your patience and your grace and your mercy showed toward us. Help us to reflect well your goodness and your glory. In your name, amen.